Today, we're here with Shanique Allen. She's a nourishment strategy and mindset coach on a mission to help women liberate themselves from the obsessive pursuits and mindset of diet culture. She does this so they can reclaim nourishment, health, and joy in every aspect of their lives. Welcome, Shanique.
Hi, thank you for having me, Carrie.
Very excited to have you on the show today. Tons of things to ask you. I've been researching you and looking, and you're everywhere, and you're using these wonderful words like undiet and seem to really be on a very driven and heartfelt mission. So thank you for coming on the show to talk about this for the listeners.
Thank you for having me.
Would you mind telling us a little bit just about you personally, like your background and kind of your story and what's led you here to what you're doing today?
All right, so I'm Jamaican, born and bred, and I now live in Washington State. And interestingly enough, I'm a trained economist.
Oh,
uh, and I did that, plus also worked in corporate finance, and I worked in tech with data. So I'm a geek, if you want to call it that.
I love that.
Just, in terms of school and what I went to school for. However, I got into fitness. I played college I played a sport in college.
Okay.
And one of the things that I needed to do was get stronger. And my coach had said, in order for you to be a better player, and I was trying to get to the national team, he said you needed to get stronger. So I'd gotten injured actually and needed to, heal from that. So he's like, you get strong so you can be a good contender for making the national team. So I joined the gym and things changed after that. And I started to get more involved in fitness and I saw the change in my body, saw the change in my game, and kind of just dived full, went head on into it and exploring it. And from that, got into competing in bodybuilding. And
was that your initial sport, bodybuilding?
No. It was volleyball. So
okay.
I was a multi-sport athlete, but volleyball was my love. And I got into that. And when I got into the gym and it changed my body physically, I also got a little stronger for my game and all of that. But the physical change was the impressive part. And I'm saying impressive here in quotations. And that was the catalyst, I suppose, for me diving headfirst into fitness and health. And then I just kind of snowballed from there into me becoming an instructor and then a personal trainer. And I was just all into health and wellness. And I'm putting this in quotations.
Right. Yeah.
I've had some massive shifts since then. So that's how I got into it. Where I am now is a series of many events and transitions. But for the short story is I got into dieting for a long time, and picked up some habits as far as, restricting food and making sure that it was about maintaining a particular physique. And while that was a nature of the sport I was in, which is bodybuilding, it became something that I kind of tried to adopt, or I adopted it into my normal way of living. So outside of competition, my life was about making sure I ate a particular way, trained a particular way, and I was very regimented in that. But when life started to happen in certain ways, I started to experience certain transitions and shifts, it became untenable. So I couldn't maintain this strict and rigid way of doing things. So it got to a point where I was like, no, something's got to give, because mentally it was not particularly helping me. And then I started to explore what it meant, what it would mean to move away from that. Scary stuff, having done it for years, but slowly started to do that. And then when things came to a head, because I had ailing parents, getting married, a couple of things happening one after the other. And out of this, I actually started my own business in fitness and health. And then add to that stress, burnout from doing things on my own for a long time. it just became too much. And I was like, this is not sustainable. The way I was trying to maintain the rigidity and the diet and the restrictions, I couldn't sustain it. So I decided to just burn everything I thought I knew about health to the ground and start from scratch. And by that, I meant focus more on me. So it was ditching dieting, undieting. But before I could undiet, I had to kind of unlearn a couple things. And one of them was that my health was not just about the way I looked. It was just not about the rigid eating. In fact, it wasn't healthy. I developed disordered eating habits. And, it was the kind of thing that I would say, for want of a better phrase, shines a light on, okay, this is not particularly healthy. Despite me preaching and talking about health all the time, my behaviors were not, in fact, as healthy as I thought they were. So I had to redefine health for myself, particularly when dealing with ailing parents and what it meant for me as well.
Yeah.
So a complete perspective shift, which brought me to here now, where I am just all about nourishing myself in the simplest of ways possible to suit my life. And it's not about the physical transformation. It's not about, maintaining and upholding a particular ideal, which is what diet culture promotes and pushes. It's about nourishing your body in the best way possible so you can show up in life the way you want to.
That's, very powerful. Very powerful. I think I get it. Definitely. And I love your use of this term, undieting and unlearning and unschooling. It's this deconstructing our habits and our entire experience, an entire way that we've learned to be. It can be kind of a confronting process. I think it sounds pretty amazing that you I imagine, especially in something like bodybuilding, which is so like your body is what's being judged, right? Like your physique, the poses you hold, like weightlifting. Was that a part of it, or was it more just like the posing?
Well, the posing piece was just one small piece. That was a show day type of thing. Yeah. And you'd practice that, yes. But for the most part, the bodybuilding lifestyle was about the gym and making sure you ate a certain number of meals a certain way. You need to avoid, quote unquote, in hindsight, it's regular food, but in the bodybuilding space, it's considered unhealthy, unless you're having like quote unquote cheat days, which, it was really just giving yourself the permission to binge eat. That's what that was. Yeah. And it became just something that I couldn't identify with anymore, or because I was changing or transitioning, it didn't fit with, or it didn't align with the values that I had anymore. Yeah. And with bodybuilding, it was really just about what they call taking care of yourself. Really is just, I don't know how else to explain it without offending people, those who are genuinely not like this in the space, but it's just a way to be a little obsessive about your body, your physique. That's
considered taking care of yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, taking care of yourself, making sure, you maintain your muscles, you're eating a particular way, making sure you're drinking this amount of water, you're getting, a certain amount of sleep. And a lot of it is focused on those hours in the gym or the amount of time you spend putting your meals together. So it's almost like your life is reduced to eating on a schedule and working out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty intense.
That's what it was. No, don't get me wrong, there are people who have lives outside of that, but to be in the sport, it really boils down to that. At least that was my experience then. I'm not saying it's everyone's experience. I'm just saying that was my experience and that was my impression and what I took away from it. And at some point it became something that I could no longer sustain and say that I was taking care of myself. because it led to me having disordered ways of eating. And it took me a while to even note that my way of eating was disordered.
I think it's pretty amazing that you did, that you kind of, in a sense, it sounds like you broke free from something where the disordered eating, the obsession about your actual physical image is like literally it's the thing you're supposed to do, what you're rewarded for. And you took a huge step back from that. You've mentioned a couple times that what led you to that step back was other things in your life. Yeah. Like you were in a state of transition somehow.
Yeah.
So did that kind of give you the distance you needed from from what you were doing? Yeah.
It's a case where these transitions forced that step back. It wasn't something where like, oh, well, I'm going. No, it's like, it's either you find a way to, wrangle your life take your life and fit it into this box of me trying to maintain this particular lifestyle, or break free of the box of trying to maintain that lifestyle and focus on, at the time it was surviving life as it was with the transitions that were happening. And then after that, it became making it, a little more, my life less hectic, because things were changing and you needed the mental clarity to work through things. There was grief involved, so we're processing that as well. Yeah. So to do all of that meant that something had to give, and it would have been trying to stick to this thing or find a way to navigate this new transition, this new period, this new set of challenges. And it was easier, or it just made, not easier, it made sense. I will not say it was easier, because you spend quite a bit of time for so long doing this one thing to suddenly stop doing it for something else, or let me just say, to just stop doing it, create some kind of disconnect. You're like, okay, I need to navigate all of this now without focusing on this food and the fitness. How do I do that? So I wouldn't say it's easier, but it just was a thing that needed to go at the time. Yeah.
Wow. How long did that take you? I mean, now you're helping other humans do that, right? So how long did it take you to kind of get the hang out of that, coming out of such an intense, mindset? How long did that mindset shift take you?
It's still happening.
Yeah.
So we're in 2022. Let's say the better part I'd say the last 8 years total.
Okay.
But intensely the last 5.
Yeah. That's some major deconstructing happening.
Yeah.
You were in deep.
I mean, you spend your 20s. Because I got into this when I was in my 20s, and let's say the better part of 13 years.
Yeah.
In that kind of lifestyle.
Yeah. And at the same time working corporate, is that right?
Yeah, so I was working corporate. So I worked corporate, and then I started my little business on the side. So it was do that in the early morning, take care of clients, take care of my own training, then go to work, and then do it again in the evening until I transition completely to doing it. Became, it was no longer my side hustle and became the main thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think also one of the things that's so cool about what you did was that, and that you're talking about, is like, I had this business, and anyone that owns a business knows, how much we fall in love with the businesses that we have and the work we're doing. So being able to say, like, put in a few years of it and then be like, this is not it. I have to stop this and go in a different direction. Like, that's a really hard and brave thing to do.
Yeah. And I made that twice, like, so corporate to doing my own thing where I went. So I was a personal trainer, group fitness instructor, and I did consulting, corporate wellness as well. And that became my thing. However, I was still very much steeped in the diet culture and pursuing bodybuilding and all of that. And burnout was something that was the demise of that phase of my life.
Right.
Because burnout happened. I left a cushy corporate job to work 24/7. There's zero boundaries, just trying to get this business and maintain this business because you're a solopreneur. And then burnout was also contributed to me starting to step away, having experienced that burnout. So when all of that came to a head, and I ended up migrating to the US. Then I was like, okay, I just burned everything again. I just burnt things. I'm like, okay, my business, I'm just gonna shut that down. And I did. I just shut everything down and went cold for a little bit because I realized I was really burnt out. And at the same time, going through the transition of not just migrating, but losing my dad suddenly, my mom's health taking a turn for the work. So, all of that kind of added to that need to step back, that need to change course, that need to re-examine some things and unlearn things. So it was not an easy process. And it's something that I have had to do over and over and over because you reevaluate things ever so often. So I left that business, left corporate, then launched on my own, and then burnt that to the ground. And then here I am again, doing this in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. And this thing of burnout is very real. And like you said, it's kind of like this ongoing, you've got to reevaluate and reevaluate. I think anyone that's been through burnout, I know like I myself experienced it last year. Was it earlier this year? No, last year, at the very end of 21. And, people talk about burnout but I think you don't really get it until you find yourself doing something crazy, like walking out of a 6-figure job with no income and just I don't even care. I can't, for me, it was I became nearly non-functional, I would say. And it was scary. It was but I didn't even care. I was that burnt out that I just simply didn't care, just shut down.
And burnout is a thing where, first of all, recognizing it is not as easy as people. Now it's become a little more, people are a lot more cognizant of it and even willing to call it out and to say this is what it is. However, for the longest time, even just the idea of it was the idea of burnout was nowhere near my mind. Why? Because culturally, you're taught to push through. You just have to make things happen. You just have to buckle down. You just have to grin and bear it, or rest at some, take your little rest here and there. But it's just part and parcel of working for yourself or just being an adult.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. So even calling it burnout wasn't something that I was accustomed to. It took a while for me to recognize that that's what it was. And to accept it, that, okay, it just meant that you were just carrying a lot by yourself without help.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then also to have the courage to make those big changes, but I get it too. Again, for me, coming out of burnout has been a trial and error kind of thing. Okay, is this going to work for me? I'm willing to try it. But I'm more acutely aware now than I've ever been when something's not working, that I have to stop doing it.
It's almost like the edges. You get to an edge. It's like a live wire. I'm a little close to this. You feel the energy of it, and you're like, okay, no, you're not gonna go there, because having been there, I have a friend that says, when I feel burnt around the edges, crispy around the edges is what she says. When you start to feel crispy around the edges, then you know that things are, you need to find a way to temper that, to step away from that, to take a step back, slow down.
Yeah. Would you mind talking a little bit about your relationship with your menstrual cycle? This is a question that I find to be such, the perspective of professional and competitive athletes have such a rich perspective on.
Well, before I even talk about being a competitive athlete, I do remember when I first got my period. I will never forget it. And I remember lying on the, and I'm not somebody that remembers a lot of things as a child. But I do remember it. I got it early, what was considered early. And it was one of those, I was at home with my grandmother and I didn't even tell her. I told her that I was having a stomach ache. And the remedy at the time was, if you have a stomach ache, you drink ginger tea. That's, because my, old folks, like my grandparents or my grandmother, will tell you there's a bush tea for everything, right?
Okay. So, yeah.
So if you have some ailment, there's a bush tea for that. So ginger tea was the thing at the time. And I remember curled up on the carpet in the living room. I don't think my mom was home. I think my grandmother is who I was with. I was like, this is just, so I had got no talk of period. I had no, my mother, I don't recall my mother having a conversation with me other than, I think it may have been my bigger sister who may have said, well, here, you got to wear pads.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if my biggest sister or it was my mother. I honestly don't remember. But the point was, I do not remember having a conversation with her. I don't remember being told about what to expect. It was just a matter of, okay, you're going to be bleeding once a month. That was it.
Yeah.
And you just deal with
it.
Surprise! You just deal with it. So, but for me, funny enough, is I do remember for the longest time, maybe until I was 30 years old, I never tracked my period. I just knew when it was coming. Like my body just told me when it was coming. And I'd be like, all right, I feel it. It's, it's about about here.
You're intuitive about it. Okay.
Yeah, it's right about here. So I would either be on the money, like, okay, I'm going to see this tomorrow, or it's within a couple of days. I could tell. But I never did the calendar tracking. I was never taught that. I knew nothing about that.
Okay.
And it wasn't until I got, and I changed contraception to an IUD that I started to track my period. And
was the IUD hormonal or non-hormonal?
No, non-hormonal.
So it was like the copper?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had that for years. That's intense because you bleed like crazy when you get it. And then for a long time.
It changed my period then because I could no longer tell. I just knew what happened was I would just have a sudden onset of menstrual cramp. And then, that was it. Before, I wouldn't get the cramps until after my period started. So with the IUD, I was like, okay, well, I can't predict when it's coming now. So I started to track. That was when I was 30. I think I was 34.
Okay. Well,
when I started track. I'm 42 now. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
So tracking was something I didn't start doing until then. Knowing the phases wasn't something I understood until in my 30s either.
Yeah.
It was just nothing. It was just never brought up in conversation. It was never something that we were empowered to learn other than to know that, okay, your period is your period, life goes on.
Yeah.
So as an athlete, because I could tell when it was coming, for me, it was just, okay, just have yourself ready and just be prepared for when it comes and life goes on, literally. So I would have my intense training day. I used to train 4 to 5 times a week, volleyball, that is, in addition to going to the gym and stuff like that. So it never, for me, it was the nuisance, and I use nuisance loosely. It was just the thing that you just had to deal with and move on. That's how I treated my period. When I started to have extremely low body fat, it shifted a little bit where it became not irregular so much as very short. So when I had my calories pretty low and I had really low body fat at the time, I got really short periods. I mean, like 1 to 2 days.
Yeah.
Right.
That's that vital sign right there.
And then, but because my energy started to get a little affected, I kind of recognized that, okay, maybe there's some connection. Still, even though I had that that realization, I was like, okay, but still what it meant was maybe I didn't have as much energy for training, so I would just drag during training, or I would cut my training time in the gym in half, or I wouldn't teach the entire class. I would just teach half of it and then just instruct for the rest of it. So I may not have intentionally done things, but intuitively my body was like, okay, I might be, depending on the phase I was in, I do recognize that I had those low energy periods.
Yeah.
But because life goes on, this is how it is that you're taught as a woman, at least how I grew up and the culture I lived in. No one talks about your period.
Is it really stigmatized in Jamaica, or was it when you were growing up?
It's not so much stigmatized as it, well, I guess it's just common that women don't talk about it unless you're around other women. But even with your parents or with your elders, even your grandmothers, your aunt, you don't, like, it's not something I could have open discussion. I mean, we're on a podcast talking about periods here. This is not something that my aunts or my grandmother would talk about with me. It's just, well, it's just something, you're a young lady now. So the only thing you need to be concerned with is the fact that you can't get pregnant.
Yeah.
That's really it, you know? So as an athlete, for me, it was just this thing that I had to deal with. I would play with cramps. I mean, sometimes cramps are really bad, but I'm an athlete, so it's pop a painkiller.
Yeah.
And go.
Just power on, power through.
Yeah. So there was no consideration in fact that I had low periods. You know, I had this time of the month, this time of the cycle, you know, you're going to be really strong and your energy is going to be, you know, your strength is going to be through the roof and your energy is going to be through the roof. So you can do it. No, none of that. None of that was considered. None of that was talked about. None of that was learned, at least from my perspective. However, what I did notice was, or what changed for me, or what kind of made period something for me to at least just consider in terms of how it affected me, however slight, was I had a friend who had really bad cramps and then found out that she had endometriosis. And I will never forget, like, just the impact that that had on her. I mean, to the point where we'd have to take her to the hospital, like two of us, and this was in college. And it was just, I'm like, women do go through that. And then I started to learn about other women with fibroids and how removing, you know, those fibroids, how it had an impact on them.
Yeah.
And it's just through those experiences that I learned more about the menstrual cycle. Still, I was not tracking because as far as I was concerned, I had a normal cycle that I could tell. So why did I need to track?
It sounds like also you knew your body really well. Even though you were pushing it to the brink, it sounds like in those years you knew your body, because you said like you would just know a couple days before, but that's because what I'm seeing, understanding, imagining is that it's because you know your body so well and how you're going to perform that you know if that little bit is off there, you know. So you know that it's gonna, it's coming.
Yeah, it is. But the thing with, even with knowing that, there was still the expectation to keep things normal. So let's use my volleyball, for example. I would be having really bad cramps. Back would be, tight. And I would feel a particular way. But the expectation is my ass needs to be on the court. And if I've got games this weekend, I need to be I need to come with the same energy, come with the same strength, come with just perform normally. So it was a case of, you put that aside. Whatever you're going through, put it aside. You got to play.
Yeah. I think that's our generation. I'm a similar age to you. And I think that is like kind of what was happening then. And in a way, like in feminism, it was kind of what was happening then. Like, I can do everything a man can. And I don't need to make adjustments for my period. Come on, I can power through it. And, it doesn't lead to necessarily like a terribly negative relationship with the cycle. If anything, like it's a neutral stance on it. Like this doesn't hold me. I don't hate it because it doesn't hold me back, because it doesn't hurt, because I'm fine, because everything's normal, but it's certainly not the best relationship with the cycle in terms of like, honoring it and giving it space. And this whole thing you have of undieting and unlearning, that theme for you really resonates with me, because like my journey in menstrual cycle awareness was a massive unschooling. And my unlearning that I had to do, and my unschooling was in being able to see and understand myself as a cyclical person, and that being okay, like taking that space, like, no, I'm not the same all the time. And no, I'm not going to be able to like keep up the running routines that I have all month long. There's going to be days where I don't want to do it and my body doesn't want to do it, and that's okay. Like giving myself permission. I think that that's something that like we've talked on this podcast before about intuitive eating and, this nutrition thing, that's a huge part, like where menstrual cycle awareness and like, let's say healthy relationships with food, like there's intersection there in terms of listening to the body, making it okay.
Yeah. And it's something that's missing from the I wouldn't say just the health and wellness space, but let's go with that because that's the realm we're in.
Yeah.
That intuitiveness, that trusting the intuitiveness, and tapping into it and utilizing it. But something you said, which I completely agree with, is recognizing that your body as someone who menstruates or has a menstrual cycle, your body and you are not the same all month long. Like the seasons, the cycle. I myself, now that I'm recognizing just how much of a cyclical person I am, and I wasn't using the word cyclical before, I was just using seasonal.
Right.
Because I do have my seasons. So I know during the summer, I am completely scatterbrained. I'm not focused at all on work. I just want to be outside where sunshine is bright and days are bright and there's activity and I want to be out there. Wintertime, I am not used to winter. Once it hits, that cold period, I just want to be under a blanket all day. My mood is low, my energy is low. And I live in a place where it's dark for however many months of the year. So add that to it, makes it even more so. And it wasn't until moving here 5 years ago that I realized just how much my body is a seasonal being, let's put it that way. Because even when I lived where it was sunshine 24/7, 364 days out of the year, I do recall having moments when I was not particularly, as energetic as I normally am. However, I pushed myself to be that way because it was expected, and two, it gave me the opportunity not to sit and think about the things I didn't want to think about, or to take the moment to look at the other side, softer side, the kinder side. It was always just go, 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 go. So this whole matter of being cyclical and it being okay is something that I'm just leaning into, truthfully, in the last couple of years. And the more I lean into it, is the more I realize, even throughout from a month-to-month basis, I have it on my calendar, I have productive week. I literally have those labeled because I know.
And that's what menstrual cycle awareness. So if you're already doing that and trying to like find your thing, and this is the thing, like I'm always like, I can't tell you what your inner summer properties are. Only you can know that, because if I try to tell someone that, it's going to be wrong, because people have different things in their different seasons. But that kind of tracking of your productivity, or how you feel about your business, how you feel about your podcasting that you're doing, how you feel about content creation or working with clients or your personal relationships, like all of that, to me, I track it back to my menstrual cycle, because I'm always kind of cycle tracking of which day I'm on. And like, that's the power in it. I've realized, like, actually, I'm not some like unpredictable, crazy, different all the time type of woman. I'm actually pretty darn predictable. It's just on a different pattern. It's on kind of a monthly cycle, a 28-ish day cycle that we're not taught about, and unfortunately I didn't really connect with that understanding until I was well into my 30s. And, like, oh, wait a minute.
So that's part of the unlearning and relearning, which is something that I work heavily with clients in working through, rather, because most people, by the time they get to me for working with me, they are already aware of the fact that for them, what they've been doing has not been working. And it's not about the diet. It's about the way they think about themselves. It's the beliefs that they've had, and they have some unlearning to do. So in the process of undieting, we focus on shifting beliefs, examining beliefs and shifting them where they need to shift in order to better serve clients as far as what their values are and where they want to go with their health, with their life in general, because it's not just about food. And that's also part of the unlearning piece, because even though the program is under your nutrition, it's really about nourishment in and of itself. And that may include food, but it will more than likely include other things as well. And
other things like what?
It's not just food, it's not just exercise. We're talking about, things like maybe sleep. We're talking about, things like the relationships that people might be in, whether they're setting boundaries, whether their views of what taking care of themselves mean, and redefining what that might look like or what that needs to look like. Because the other thing that I deal with too is, and this signature with the folks that I work with, these people are also in some kind of transition. So whether it's they've had a career shift, whether they are, starting a family postpartum, or, whether they're starting a business, or whether they're now empty nesters, there is some kind of transition that requires the mindset shift, because what they used to do were dieting and forcing their bodies to fit an ideal quote unquote look of health. They recognize that it is so much more than the way their body looks, and it's so much more than punishing themselves with exercise. There are so many other things and aspects of their wellness that they are not accounting for, and they want to account for, because they are a whole person. They don't just eat and exercise.
Yeah.
So it's like understanding they're in different seasons and working with the seasons that they're in.
I love that. Very cool. So transition seems to have played a large role in your personal journey. And then, so kind of most of your clients, you said, are in a stage of transition as well.
Yeah. And that kind of just happened. It wasn't, the common thread wasn't found until, I did my whole framework and recognized the thread between folks. But why I ended up focusing a lot on quote unquote nourishment and the mindset specifically is because in working with nutrition clients, because a lot of them came to me with wanting to have better eating habits and, nourishing themselves better with food. What we found was much of their struggle wasn't about food at all. It was rather about the mindset, the beliefs, and the perspective they had around health that led to the habits that they developed. And in some case, maybe they had disordered eating habits. But what tends to happen is that in trying to build the habits, much of the works is centered around making space for adding the things they need, the things that, like the rest, the sleep, getting help and the support, creating better boundaries. So they incidentally know a lot about food. That's the other thing. So I don't need to do a lot of work around, okay, people know what vegetables are, people know what protein.
Right.
People actually know how to feed themselves. Like they know what a balanced meal is. But it's the idea of what it needs to look like for them to be quote unquote healthy. That is where the shifting happens. That's where we look at the beliefs. That's where the unlearning happens. So, this whole thing of needing to, maybe in some cases with a lot of people, that they feel that they're out of control because they're allowing themselves to have certain foods and they never used to allow themselves to have it. So now they're just like going all in on it, and we work through that. So there is some tapping into intuition there. So recognizing that a lot of people aren't trusting of their intuition because of the years spent not trusting it. So trying to regain that trust now, it's like climbing a hill. It's not an easy thing, and it takes work. So that's how I ended up doing this work. It's not about food for a lot of people. It's really about the undieting and the unlearning so that they can nourish themselves better without these diet rules in the back of their head. Because a lot of people live by diet rules. Where they come from, God knows. Some diet that they've tried, and then they're just trying to maintain it, only to realize it's not sustainable with the lives that they have. And they're, not to mention the season, because it doesn't work necessarily for their life, full stop, but it more so doesn't work when there are shifts, when there are transitions, when they move into different seasons. So it's unlearning and undieting.
That's part of that, how, diet culture can be so toxic. And people can, it sounds like though you're talking about something bigger than being on a diet, but more like people that have maybe internalized the diet, or internalized all these rules. Like, and I saw this on, maybe it was on your Twitter, of like, don't take the power away from these foods, or, stop putting these foods on a pedestal and just call them for what they are. Right. Like, stop giving them so much power.
Yeah. Because
of like good food, bad food, is that what you are talking about there?
Yeah. When putting foods on pedestals is really because of the way food has been moralized or placed on a hierarchy. You have your good foods, you have your bad foods. And as a result, people have heightened sense of, 1 second. Oh, sorry, did not put my phone on.
That's okay.
Okay, I just lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Sorry.
Good foods and bad foods.
Right. So having people putting foods on a pedestal, classifying them as good, as bad, classifying them as healthy and unhealthy. Like, okay, so you have this food that's unhealthy and you have this food that is healthy. No, yes, you have foods that provide more nutrition than others, but that moral assignment of food that happens with food is what makes it hard for people to be neutral with food. Like, you have foods that are far more nutritious and more helpful in so many ways. And then you have the foods that have nothing to do with nutrition, but they do provide a place in satisfaction, because food is more than just nutrients, right? Yeah. And that is missing from diet culture. Diet culture says that, well, if you enjoy food for any other reason than nutrients, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, and it's a much larger experience than that, and plays a much larger role in our lives. Another thing that I saw that you've kind of put out in the world is this call to don't ignore your engine light. What's that about?
Oh, that was a blog post I did, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that sounds like it. Yeah.
I think, what was I talking about?
Well, I mean, I'll let you think about it. I latched onto it because it's that link with menstrual cycle awareness again, or the way that I try to live and practice living is exactly that, listening to your body, like when the engine light comes on, don't ignore it or your car is going to break down.
Yes, that is true. I remember writing that. Yes. And I did make that analogy about the service engine light being on, like how long you ignore it before you get it looked at. It's when the car, you find yourself stranded. Then you're like, okay, I have no choice but to do something. So the point is, the signs are often there and we ignore it. Again, let's look at when, you're going through your period as a young person or a young woman. You ignore the pain, you ignore the low energy and just say, suck it up. You have to keep moving. You have to keep doing things. But the body, as strong as it is also in need of that downtime, in need of that care, in need of that preventative maintenance, for want of a better phrase. And I find that a lot in the work that I do, but also in in many experiences, like many instances and with folks in my life, they ignore the pain that might be showing up far more often, ignore the headaches, ignore the irritability, ignore the fact that, the sleep is not so great, why it's not so great. And we keep ignoring these things, and they add on and they add on until sometimes we just break. But unlike car parts, you can replace, you can't replace you. So the call for that post I put out was, do not ignore the signs. Even if you can't go all in for a full check, the idea here is to, when something pops up, to act, to take a look, even if, a cursory glance to say, okay, this doesn't feel great, let me keep an eye on it. As opposed to, all right, I'll just move, I'll just keep going.
Yeah, I have to practice that with, like, I get fever blisters. Right. And so that's always a good or like powerful indicator for me of what's happening with my immune system, because I get them when my immune system is somehow compromised, and I feel them before they erupt. Like there'll be like a little tingling on my lip. And, my older sisters actually taught me how to mitigate that. She figured out a hack. Like I just take like a bunch of L-lysine, that supplement, vitamin, whatever it is. I don't know. I guess it's a vitamin, L-lysine. But as soon as I feel it, and it's so I'm latching onto that with what you're saying. Like, because if I ignore it, it's a full-blown fever blister that is going to be painful for like 10 days, 2 full weeks. So like I've had to learn with that particular example that, like, when you feel the tingling, like do stop and act immediately. Do not just ignore it and think it's going to go away.
Yeah. I mean, I align it to say, I like, what's the word? I'm mumbling over this word.
You align?
I'm likening it to, likening it to making small checks, like every now and then you take a look under the hood of your car. It's the same thing here. You might not be a mechanic, but with your car enough, the hope is that you understand when
check the fluids at least.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, things like small boundaries that you setting them and enforcing them. Passing off some of the work to somebody else. So the small checks might not even be a physical manifestation. It could be just your energy levels. It could be just not wanting to get up out of bed, your motivation, that type of thing. It could mean, getting some help, like maybe it's talking to a therapist if it's something that's accessible to you, or looking for some kind of professional support. It's probably looking at non-food ways to cope with certain things. Maybe that's going for walks, maybe that's meditation, maybe that's playing a sport, maybe that's picking up boxing, or taking out your aggression on a boxing pad or something, but
and maybe doing less too, right?
Doing less, which is all, like literally just taking rest, doing nothing, and not just doing less. I'll add to that, do nothing. Like find a moment to do nothing, and that one, do nothing, is something that's very hard for a lot of us to do. Like, I will not move further if I do nothing. No, you will kind of give yourself some energy if you do nothing. Provided, here's the thing, there's also this whole concept that not all of us have the luxury of doing nothing. And that's a reality, because, we all don't have the same access. We don't all have the same privileges. So
absolutely,
being mindful of that is also something that I try to be and also share, because there's this concept that you have 100% control over everything about your health. And while there are things you do have control about, there are also still things that a lot of people do not have control over.
There's external circumstances. There's life. Yeah.
So being mindful of that as well. But the idea there is that it's not a matter of if, though, regarding your the checks that you need to make. It's a matter of when. I'll use my
Yeah.
example of that burnout. Like I felt real crispy around the edges, but I was like, I gotta keep going. I gotta keep going. But when you're exhausted all the time, when you're having skin breakouts, when maybe your period has changed, maybe you're having headaches all the time, it is a sign, and your body is smart. I always say this, and people's like, is it though? I'm like, yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Shanique, thank you so much for sharing all of this beautiful wisdom with the listeners and with me. Yeah, thank you. Where can people find you? I've kind of given you some shout outs, but yeah, can you tell us your Instagram handle, Twitter, whatever, all those things?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Shanique Allen _. It's the same on Twitter. I'm on Facebook, Shanique Allen Coaching. You can find me on Facebook that way. To work with me, clients can go to my website and book a call. Well, actually, it's an application. So if, the application is just the first step, regardless of whether or not you choose to move forward or we choose to move forward. The idea is application is one way for me to get a pulse on where you're at, but also to give you an idea of whether or not this is the work that you want to do or need to do, or that this is the kind of support you need for the next phase of whatever your journey, your health, your wellness journey is.
Okay. All right, great. And I'll put all those links for everyone in the show notes, so you can go there if you'd like to connect with Shanique. Shanique, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.